When I was in my teens, I remember feeling really, skinny, very insecure about the way that I looked. I didn't have a lot of muscle on either. And I remember the way that I physically looked also kind of represented my mental state. It was very frail. I was very timid. And if you argued with me, you could probably push me around very easily when it came to certain arguments. So that was literally my whole being. You know what I mean? And you might wonder what any of this has to do with, getting big. And I'm going to get to that. So don't worry about it. But I can imagine that a lot of you have also felt that way before. You know what I mean? Where you've gone through experiences that have made you feel weak. You've gone through and talked with people that have made you feel small or insecure or, you know, it felt like they had control over your life more than you had control over yours. And didn't help that you didn't feel good about yourself, that you weren't confident, that you felt hella lost, you didn't know what you were doing. You know what I mean? And today I want to talk about that for specifically you guys because I know I struggled with that problem. And I want to talk about a show that really helped me fix my mindset around this. Um, and the show's called Blue Lock. Okay, it's an anime called Blue Lock, and its entire philosophy is what helped me be able to go from someone who felt very frail mentally to someone who was really strong now mentally, and was able to go to the gym for, you know, half a decade, do 1,300 workouts, and be more firm in my, sort of skin, and be able to disagree with people, be able to be more firm in my shoes, like grow into myself. And I think that's a very important part of getting big into the gym, going from skinny to going big, you know what I mean? Or to getting big, because in a physical sense, you're literally filling out your frame. But you have to do that mentally too. You have to grow into yourself mentally, I guess, is how you would put it. Or else other people more so dictate your life. And to some extent, you can't be blamed because, your parents or your teachers have told you what to do all your life, and that doesn't make them bad people, but that's just how you've been conditioned, That's what happens. That's what you learn in psychology, essentially, is conditioning, right? And this show really helped me break out of it. So let me explain the premise of this show before I get into it, okay? So this show, Blue Lock, it's essentially a story about this um, player named Yoichi Isagi, okay? And he plays for one of Japan's like high school teams, okay? And what essentially happens is um, they scout him out. They scout him out like this group, this org named Blue Lock. They scout him out, and what happens is they have this org Blue Lock. They have like 300 strikers. Okay, all come together. Which, for those of you who don't know, strikers in soccer or football, you know, um, though that's the position that is usually there to score the goals. Okay, so that's the position there that's there to score the goal. So you have 300 of these guys. It's like, why are 300 strikers only there? It's because this project, Blue Lock, is there to create the best striker out of those 300. Okay. Or how many ever strikers there are. It's there to create the best one. So it's almost like a battle royale of strikers, of soccer, like strikers that play against each other to see who the best possible striker is so that they can play in Japan's World Cup. Okay. So that's the premise of the show. Now, the show has the key philosophy that doesn't follow other anime's philosophies, okay? Which in most sports anime, what happens is teamwork. Yay, hooray, we're working together, it's a good thing. And don't get me wrong, that's also important in this show too. It's just something else is focused on more, and this is what I want to focus on for this video, especially if you felt like very frail, especially physically and especially mentally, and you felt like you were being pushed around a lot more, and you couldn't like you didn't feel like you were allowed to think for yourself or say what you wanted to say or be who you wanted to be. And that is this concept of an ego, okay? Now, I know a lot of things come to your mind when you think about ego, but I'm going to explain three definitions of ego, and I'm going to only address one of them, which is the show's version of what is declared as ego. So there's a psychological version, which for most of you who learned about Freud, I'm going to make this very simple. I'm not going to go on a whole lecture about this, but Freud's version of it was the ego essentially decides whether you do the moral thing, which is your superego, or you do the pleasurable thing, which is the id. Okay, so it kind of mediates between those two things. That is a psychological version of the ego. Now you have the other ego, which is used in more casual conversation, which is like, oh, that guy has a huge ego. He's probably a dick. You know what I mean? Like an inflated sense of self worth, essentially, is that ego. Oh, that girl probably thinks she's hot shit because she's talking to this many guys. Or, oh, this guy thinks he's cool because he's got this car, or he's got that physique, or he's got these looks, or he's got whatever. You know what I mean? An inflated sense of self worth. Okay. Now, an ego in this show, what I can approximate it to, now this is my interpretation of it. It might not be exactly bullseye for those of you who've watched it, but it's essentially a strong sense of self-worth, or not self-worth, but individualistic skill that someone can have. Because to be a good striker, you can't necessarily rely on everybody else, even though you're playing on a team. It has to be so much so that you can rely on your own individual skill and perform some crazy stuff, you know what I mean? Like work on your own, adapt and learn, and yeah, go based on that. And that comes from this insatiable, which also goes under the definition of ego for this show. It comes with the insatiable drive to be better. Okay, be the best striker in the world, because again, remember, it's 300 strikers. We're trying to find out who's the best one. So they have to have a strong sense of worth that allows them to think, I'm going to be the one to score the goals. I'm going to be the one that does good. You know what I mean? That's literally what the show starts off with. It starts off with a dilemma where the main character Isagi, he's in a dilemma. Does he shoot or does he pass? And he passes it. And because he passes the ball, they actually lose. And he gets all pissed because he's like, I could have shot that ball if I just had more of like a sense of ego, which they started talking about later in the show. So in some sense, um, ego can be translated to a greater sense of, like, a strong sense of self-confidence. But I think the reason wow, I can't talk. They define it as ego is because for some people that's like an extreme word, and for certain people who watch it, just like I was talking about, like individuals who kind of feel weak and powerless, and in terms of the control that they have on their own life, they feel very physically frail, very mentally frail. They need a little bit of that extreme to be able to assert themselves more. And that's what happened when I watched that show. I was like, oh my God, like something inside of me is calling out, um, to want to adapt some of the traits that these characters have, um, because I felt like that was what a part of me wanted. And um, this is something that actually someone known as Carl Jung, which who was a psychoanalyst, right? He looked into, and I think he would call this the shadow side. And essentially, the shadow side in psychology is like, for Carl Jung, it was like the aspect of your personality that you would shove deep inside of like yourself. Pause. You know what I mean. But like keep away and hidden from society and from everybody else because it was deemed unworthy, you know what I mean? Or the market didn't value it, or people didn't value it. Okay. So that could come in the form of like, oh, your artistic skills aren't valued in the market because no one, you know, it might be hard to become a really good artist that pays, that gets paid well. Or it could, so that would be like, it stifles your creativity. It could come in the form of competitiveness. That was one other one that I noticed in Blue Lock, was like, it's very competitive, but it almost feels good. It's a good kind of competitive. It's not like, I don't know, like somehow competition got made into something so somehow toxic when it's not. You know what I mean? It's a good driving force. It's a really good driving force. Um, and it puts in this like aggression, not the kind of aggression that is used to harm people. I define it as more sort of, um, aggression in the form that like you feel like you've been suppressed for this long, and that's what I'm talking about, the shadow side. This is something that's suppressed for so long and you haven't brought it out. And so when I watched that show, for me, I felt like that side of me was calling out to integrate those traits. And one of those was, one, assertiveness, competitiveness, adaptability, and again, like other forms of just being myself and not being as frail anymore. And that's what called me so much into that show. Now, there are times where in the show, the casual use of ego would be applied more to some of the characters, right? Some of them do have a really, really inflated sense of self worth, but that's not exactly, I don't think, the definition of what ego means in that show. Because some of them do. Some of them are like, everybody else is a tool, pass the ball to me. And because of that, they're actually very, very successful. You know what I mean? It's not a desirable trait, it's not looked upon, but some of the characters embrace it and they're like, you're a tool, pass the ball to me, I'm going to score. Um, and later on, that actually stifles those same characters that use their teammates as tools because their teammates start like surpassing them. And now they have to adapt to that. You know what I mean? So it's not good to be weak and frail. So someone might think that, oh, it's really good to be, you know, how would you say it? Arrogant, like extremely arrogant. But then that doesn't help you either. You know what I mean? Because you lose a lot of um, social standing, even if you're really, really good. You lose the ability to cooperate with people, or what you would call in psychological personality traits, you'd call it being very, very disagreeable to like an extreme extent, to the point where you just don't get along at all. And then agreeableness would be like the other extreme, which is like you're always trying to work together. You're always trying to find social harmony. You know what I mean? And this video is probably for people that are more on the agreeable side and wanting to be a little bit more assertive. You know what I mean? And building a physique, I think, was one of the ways I did that because I can't exactly explain to you the amount of transformations you'll go through when you start to build your physique and when you start to when you start to bulk up. It's not necessarily the idea that when you start to bulk up, that somehow you're just going to look tougher. So that's how you're being assertive. It's more of you just becoming more confident. You know what I mean? And you sort of find yourself through that. You know what I mean? You put yourself through something very, very difficult and you start to find yourself through that. But there's some other points I also want to go over because I know this video can get quite quite complicated. But the overarching point that I'm trying to drive home basically is this show helped me just be a lot more, it helped me like release the expectation that I somehow have to, be very, very agreeable so I can be socially likable. And to some extent, we've evolved to do that because if you disagree with the pack, then you die, right? Back then, but not so much anymore. So you have to learn to listen to yourself too. And for me, what that meant was I'm going to assert myself more and I'm going to do what I really think I should genuinely do and what I want to do, which is like, for example, YouTube or making content or going to the gym and building muscle. You know what I mean? Because what's going to happen oftentimes in life, and this is what I'm going to hit, especially in the perspective of bulking. This is a point I'm going to hit, right? Especially in the perspective of bulking, which is you're not going to have the social support that you want. You're also going to be getting a whole ton of advice from people who aren't where you want to be and will actively be discouraging you. And the thing that hurts about it most is they're going to be in your circle. They're going to be friends, there's going to be family, there's going to be all these people that say things about the goals that you might have, especially in terms of a physique. I hear it every single day. I hear, oh, what is that protein going to do to you? Says the obese uncle. You know what I mean? Like you're going to hear it all the time. You're going to hear so much noise. And that's one thing this show taught me was that like you got to stop listening to the fucking noise. Like you have to shut it out because you have to realize that who you're talking to is first of all not only not following their advice, but they're not, they're also not representative of it because again, they're not following their advice. So why are you listening to them? So it told me to assert myself and question people and challenge people. That doesn't mean be a dickhead and be arrogant. That's not what I'm saying. You know what I mean? There's a graceful way to do things still. There's a graceful way to disagree. There's a graceful way to not listen. Um, There's a graceful way to do a lot of these things, and that's what I'm saying. You have to be very, very careful because although I'm using terms like ego, which can be synonymous with having an inflated sense of self-worth, and it also means the opposite, a lower sense of self-worth, because ego is on a spectrum. But usually it's um, people associated with the, oh, you think you're all that shit, you know what I mean, that kind of thing, and it can quickly become that thing. Don't get it twisted, it can. So you have to be very, very careful in drawing that line between thinking I'm just better than everybody else, you know, and rather thinking that just having an insatiable drives towards your goal and disregarding any opinion or noise, as I call it, that not only doesn't have what you want, but is trying to give you advice on something they don't even have and they don't even follow. And that is one quick way to shut out the noise. So quick. And I don't say that to be rude, by the way. I say that to be objective. Because think about it, it doesn't matter who it is. If they have what you want, then you will follow that advice. You know what I mean? That's not to say that you can't have perspectives on things. You know what I mean? But that is to say that you shouldn't necessarily take advice, you know, because sometimes I feel like that's how we get lost. That's how we get the frail mentality sometimes, because there's so many people pointing us in so many different directions. So maybe first we need to calm down and not listen to that anymore. And that's how you distinguish what is noise to what is not. What do you want? What do you want? Do you want to get bigger? For example, use me as an example right now, actually. I use in a lot of my videos this framework that, I use like clickbait sometimes, typically, like, you know what I mean? Because I want you to understand the point, but I have to play the YouTube game at the same time of why you'll be like single or why you'll stay like a certain way if you don't bulk up and get jacked. But if you're confident being that way, then what I'm saying is noise. Okay. And I'm using myself as an example just so I don't put anybody else on blast. And like, because I feel so confident in this sort of mindset. But if you did feel that way, chances are you might relate to my experience, and chances are maybe getting jacked is not going to solve all your problems 100%, but maybe it'd make you feel more attractive. Maybe it'd make you be healthier. Maybe you'd live longer. Maybe you'd be a good example to everybody around you. Maybe you could finally see what you're capable of, which is one of the biggest reasons that this show called out to me so much, and its philosophy resonated, because it wasn't just like the old, it wasn't sticking to the niceties and the social conform of everything else. It was saying you have got to develop an individualistic sense of like what you're capable of and be self-sufficient to some extent, you know what I mean, not all the way, not pushing to the extreme of like where you can't have friends or things of that nature, you know what I mean? Because that's also dysfunctional for as like to the as us as human beings. You know what I mean? Because we've evolved to be social creatures. Um, but that means all the more that you surround yourself with people who, you know, who give you a sense of you can accomplish more than you think you can, and stop being around all the bunch of fucking losers. Because I'll tell you one thing, you know what makes someone the biggest loser? It's not necessarily the fact that they drink, smoke, play video games all day, binge watch anime like literally all day. Although some of these things, if you do them in moderation, excluding like the drinking, vaping, I think that's literally negative effects on your health, especially when it comes to bulking. Anime isn't exactly you can like eat food, but it can be a problem if you binge. Same thing with video games. You can lose a lack of purpose and things of that nature, and you'll play all day and you'll lose lack of sleep. So you have to be very careful with that stuff too. Um, but that isn't the things that make someone a loser. It's the fact that some people, if you surround yourself with them, they'll kill your dreams so quick without even realizing it, whether they do it intentionally or not. There's a saying that I have that says, cynics are always right, but the world belongs to the optimists. In that everybody's going to be right about the fact that you're going to fail constantly and fall on your ass multiple times. That's just how it's going to go. They're going to be right all the time about, oh, you talking to this girl and it not working out. You know what I mean? Of course, in a halal way, but everything. But they're going to be right about the jobs that you not making the salary. They're going to be right about the one piece of content that doesn't go viral. They're going to be right about the you not becoming anything until one day you do. Until you do. Now, that doesn't mean wait around for that moment to happen. That means act on it, keep doing it, but you're going to get doubted. I make my protein shake and I'm like, what are you drinking every day? What is this for? What is that? I'm going to the gym. People tell me don't get too big. This is bad for your health, stuff like that. Of course, if you take steroids, that's completely different. That's, of course, bad. But like, remember who we're listening to here. Remember, remember who's telling you that all this stuff is bad for you when you're objectively better, when you're healthier, and then you look at them and they're exactly where they were and they haven't improved at all. Like at all. And they're telling you not to do it? Who made them a doctor, bro? Are you serious? So I know I haven't gotten to like the tactics of how I use the show to bulk exactly, but there are tactics, don't get me wrong, that I used, but it all formulates from a mindset. Do you understand? We have the saying at the gym that I work that the hardest lift, the hardest weight to lift is not any of the weights at the gym or the heaviest weight at the gym, it's the front door. And there's a reason for that. It's because it's a huge mental block for people. Do you understand? This show taught me not to make those excuses. This show taught me, which was my next point that I wanted to segue under, because I've talked about assertiveness, I've talked about competitiveness, but I haven't talked about the main character's ability, which is something that I've made a video on before, and it hits very, very hard, okay? And that is the main character, Isagi Yoichi, okay? For him to survive in Blue Lock, because again, remember, this is a battle royale, right? For him to survive in this competition, essentially, to become one of the best strikers in the world, he has to constantly adapt. He this is you don't see a whole lot of plot armor in this show besides the fact that he's the main character, so of course they're going to keep the show going. But you also see other characters develop and awaken too. And you have to understand that there when you're playing a soccer game, this is like a highly intensive, rigorous, physically draining and mentally draining sport, along with it being emotional and demoralizing if teams score. And to be able to adapt in that moment is would be incredibly difficult, even in real life. You know what I mean? And it's really difficult to do that. But this show taught me that you need to double down on wanting to do that and think it through and just find any way you can to adapt to the scenario, especially when you're facing resistance toward it. You know what I mean? There might be some work that you're doing. There might be specifically addressing bulking. You know what I mean? There might be specifically some food that you're avoiding. You're avoiding counting calories because you're afraid of like having to do it for forever, which is not the case. You're afraid of experimenting with food because you might not like it. You're afraid of going to the gym because you might be judged. You're afraid of doing this. You're afraid of doing that. You're afraid you'll get too big, which by the way, you won't, trust me. You're afraid of all of these things. You know what I mean? And I get it because it's normal because like again, if you grew up as being someone who's like that frail individual mentally and physically who couldn't stand up for themselves, like there's a lot to fear in that case. You know what I mean? Especially if you look at it from a survival sense in like a primitive way, it's like you don't exactly have the most power or the most resources. It's understandable why you'd feel that way. But you have to understand, like mentally, that's where you have to double down. That's where you have to be like, no, this is the very thing that I'm resisting. So I'm going to double down on it and I'm going to address this. Because if I don't, I lose. That's literally what happens in Blue Lock. If he does not adapt, he loses. He's out. He lost his chance forever. And for some reason, you guys think that that's not you, but you have to understand the Blue Lock game that he's in, it's kind of like the life that we're in, essentially. You know what I mean? We only also have one opportunity. It's just that that game is on a micro level because it's like a 90-minute game and life is on a bigger time horizon. But that doesn't mean that, you just wait around. You have to find a way to think it through now. You have to start now. Do you understand what I'm talking about? You have to start now. There is no one day, there's no none of that. You have to start now. Like when one of the things that I faced a lot of difficulty with, and this isn't in terms of bulking, but I'm going to give you a bulking scenario as well, was I always thought about like what kind of spouse I would want in the future. And in my culture, it is the case that like, you know, your girl is not just going to start talking to any of the guys or any of the friends that you have. If the guys have like women as well, the women talk amongst each other and the men talk amongst each other. That's kind of how that goes. So I thought to myself, like, why am I doing that now if I'm going to expect it out of a partner later? Am I going to allow myself to do something that's convenient in the moment and talk to all these women and stuff like that, do some degenerate shit, you know what I mean? Or am I going to cut it off because that's what I expect out of someone else? And the point is that I wanted to be my best version, and I knew that that's what my best version would do. So I was like, why not start now? Why wait to not interact with a lot of these people that I know I'm not going to get along with anyway because I've tried, you know what I mean? And my intention is not being met or reciprocated, which by the way goes back into the assertiveness thing. I'm asserting my ideals now. You know what I mean? People might find it convenient to do a certain thing and they might battle it, stuff like that. I'm not going to, because if I expect it out of someone else, I should be able to expect a lot of it out of myself as well. So I'm just not going to, you know, talk to a lot of them or unfollow most of them. You know what I mean? I'm not going to entertain that idea at all. So that's how I see it. And and again, the gym has been a lot of the precursor as to why I've been able to like just feel like I'm literally growing into myself. In a physical sense, I've gotten much bigger, 120 pounds to 190, right? But I've also become a lot more, and maybe there's something instinctual to do about it as well, in terms of I've gotten bigger, so I feel like I'm more of a threat. I've grown more fangs. But I've done that in terms of my mindset too, because of what it took to build this physique. And I understand now that I can use what I did to build this physique and let the discipline that I have in the gym leak into other areas of my life and make me better there. You know what I mean? And I'm not perfect by all means, you know what I mean? No one is, and it takes a while to. And I know that's a cliche, but I have to like usually address it. But again, like this show is just been able to help me do that, you know what I mean? And it's so hard to explain until you watch it for yourself, because if you feel like you're like a frail individual weak, like it will bring out the side of you that, especially if you're a man, is uber masculine and wanting to just pursue your goals, and anything else is a distraction. You know what I mean? And of course there's seasons for like being in really healthy relationships, um eventually being able to marry your spouse or hang out or go on vacation or um, be with your family, stuff like that. But like some seasons for a lot of you, like I know you probably find it hard to do the work. You know what I mean? I know you probably find it hard to do the gym. So those are the goals that you need to like lock into, because you'll be thankful for it. Not only because you'll feel better, you know what I mean, but you would have built yourself into something that you find worth respecting. And that's also important. That's crucial. Because if you want to feel good and firm in your skin, I know that seems very, very repetitive, but if you think about it, what you're doing is when you choose to go to the gym instead of doing something degenerate or being around people that don't value you or anything like that, is you've made a choice and you've sacrificed something else. And that comes out of self respect, right? And the more times you do that, the more self respect you'll build until the point where it becomes a standard. It's like a no brainer. Like that's just the level that you operate at. It's not even a question. That's how you become so, so confident, in my opinion. You know what I mean? You just keep doing the things, you just keep the promises that you make to yourself. And you also learn to be able to cultivate like what do you want to do, what do you genuinely want to become, like if you try to understand that. Like for example, right, let me use this example because I feel like a lot of you will feel lost in this very moment when I try to just explain that. But recently I've always had my ups and downs with like being a psychology major and being into exercise because I'm like, how are those two things relate? But being in the business world, I realized that any skills that I have, I can use them and combine them together and niche myself down even more. And because of that, I've I've developed a new interest in sports psychology. And all of a sudden, when I thought about that, my brain went into all these different possibilities of what I could do in sports psych, all these different certifications I can do to spike my level of skill, and therefore spike my income because I'm investing into myself. And therefore, I not only have more respect for myself, I'm asserting myself. I'm becoming who I want to be because it's genuine. I want to do it because a lot of you are going to do paths that aren't genuine to you, follow your else's dream, and then you wonder why you go into distractions. You wonder why you have no drive. Like you're not being genuine. You know what I mean? And to be genuine, to push out of that hole, you need to be able to assert yourself because there's probably some people mentally keeping you there. Like your parents telling you have to do a certain occupation, or your friends thinking that this is cringe or something like that. You know what I mean? Me making this video is a example of me asserting myself because I'm making a video on a topic that either people I know would not like, or find cringe just because like I'm talking about anime characters and they're going to be like, "Oh, it's not real," and dismiss it and miss the entire point. So, I know this video was like a bunch of stuff all in one. But I thought I'd talk about it because I feel like the lessons that I just talked about were so important into my development. And like long story short, it just helped me realize that again, I can be competitive. I can have that shadow side of me where it's like I'm allowed to be competitive and I'm allowed to assert myself and have that self-respect. And self-respect, having self-respect, I'll tell you right now, means that you're going to piss people off. Because whether it means setting a schedule at work that your boss is not going to be okay with, or whether it means disagreeing or unfollowing this girl or like anything like that didn't meet your standard, or whether it means not talking to someone because you think they're a loser anymore and they're not pushing you forward in life. That's all a form of self-respect, technically speaking, because if you continue to be in the niceties of things and you don't develop this form of ego where it's not that you think you're better than everybody else, it's that you have somewhere to go in life and you cannot sit around and wait for someone else to get better if they don't want to, so you focus on your goals. So another analogy I like using is it's not that it's not the kind of ego where you're belittling them, because all I want you to imagine is two images, one picture of you and one picture of the person that mentally you might be belittling, I guess, or like someone you might be belittling, right? It's not that you're belittling someone because they get smaller when you belittle them, right? When you hate on them, when you belittle on them, in your perception they get smaller. That's not the point. We don't want to do that. What we're trying to do is let them stay where they're at. They can say whatever they want to. We're just growing. And what happens is the same result gets achieved. They're tinier than you, but in one, you're focusing on yourself rather than belittling them. You know what I mean? And that's way better, way healthier. And as a result, they'll shrink into irrelevance, and all the fruits of your labor will be there. You go and exercise. You go focus on your diet because no one in your generation has, or no one in your family tree has, and you're doing it. Of course it's going to be weird. You're going to be doing something out of the ordinary, but as Isagi says in the anime, to be in order to change, you have to be something you're not. And that line also really really hit me too, because again, like he was going through a whole awakening process of learning to just be more self-sufficient, a little bit more individualistic in terms of leveling up your skills and being able to rely on yourself a little bit more, right? Not to the point where everybody's codependent on each other, because that extreme is bad, right? But then the other extreme is bad too, where everybody, which is what happens initially in Blue Lock, everybody's selfish, everybody's individualistic and no one can, pass around the ball to each other to score. They all want to score for themselves. And as a result, you have people with extreme egos and people that end up betraying people. But you have to find that like middle ground where you're like assertive enough. You know what I mean? So that you can learn to do, because if you can be assertive, you can do your own thing. You can grow into yourself. And then you can challenge people, you can disagree with them. You don't have to fall into their traps. You don't have to be led around by these people. You have a standard that you now operate by, and that's what you operate by. So let it be known. You know what I mean? That's how it should be. And building a physique is one of those ways to do it. And so I have a community that I'm building. Y'all should join up. It's for people who are also anime enthusiasts and gamers and stuff. You know what I mean? So join up if you think you'd be interested in that. I have weekly live calls in that, answering any fitness questions, stuff like that. I also do one-on-one coaching. Okay, so if you just want to fast track your progress by a lot, I would highly recommend that. I would highly recommend my one-on-one coaching. So I would go do that if you want. If not, use any of the free videos I have on bulking and stuff. But yeah, some of the tactical steps I used was, again, coming from more of an adaptability mindset of Isagi's. It was what it allowed me to do is, as soon as I had limiting beliefs, break through it, because I would be more solution orientated. Because think about it, when you're in the middle of a soccer game like that, it's high intense, high emotion, high everything's happening, you're fatigued, there's so much going against you, right? But you have to find a way to adapt, because otherwise you lose. It doesn't matter what you're going through. You know what I mean? Because what you're feeling right now, the consequence of you not trying, you not trying to find a way out of it, is even worse. And that's going to be the case for a lot of you. It's going to be even worse. You know what I mean? If you don't find a solution out of it, you think that it's like, you know, bad right now, just wait. You know what I mean? Like you're getting too complacent. It's just going to get worse. So you have to find a way to deal with it now. Find solutions now. If you can't get in the foods to find your calories, find the solution now, whether that's my coaching program or whether that's you going out there and finding foods and experimenting with what you like. Because at the end of the day, you like what you like, so you're going to have to find out what you like in order to bulk. And then you're also going to have to do the same with the gym. And whether anybody likes it or not, you're going to have to learn to stick with it. There's going to be a level of discomfort. You know what I mean? Because you're going against what everybody else does. It's a part of the process. But yeah, I know, again, this video is kind of like all over the place, and there's a lot of like little lessons that I talked about, but I just thought I wanted to talk about it. So I talked about it, even if it's not like the most appealing thing to everybody. Um, but yeah, go ahead and give Blue Lock a watch, and you'll probably understand what I'm talking about. It gives a whole new spin onto sports anime, and it helps you, grab some mini lessons out of it that help you go from someone who's a little bit frail to someone who's more comfortable in their skin. But not only that, you have to actually act on it too. So any of the lessons you learned there, you act on it in real life. You find something that you're genuinely purposeful about so you can chase that goal relentlessly. And as a result, build up your self respect. And all these other domains build up too, because you're going to have to learn to adapt when you're chasing that goal. You know what I mean? You're going to have to learn to assert yourself when you're chasing that goal, because people are going to disagree with you. And you're going to be competitive with the other people that are also trying to chase that goal. You know what I mean? So all of these things going together, and none of them are a bad thing, and they actually feel like life just feels a lot more like better. There's zest to life when you actually feel like you have some goals that you want to conquer, as a guy, because all the other stuff, it really is just pleasure. As much as that is a cliche, it really is just pleasure at the end of the day. It feels really good in the moment, and that's why it's so distracting. It's so goddamn distracting. Sleeping around, drinking, smoking, anime, if you binge watch it way too long, you know, as well. I'm gonna include that one in here specifically because I know I'm talking about an anime, so I don't want y'all to think that like you can just go out and just start binging shit. And then same thing with like video games, you know what I mean? Scrolling online, a whole lot of this stuff will take you away from your main purpose. And a lot of you are scared to try to look around and find, because you're scared to lose these distractions. But when you actually have a goal that you want to conquer, like you feel so good because you're becoming your best self, but you're also helping the world out. You know what I mean? It's like imagine giving out water to someone because they don't have water. You're being nice to them, you're being kind, you're showing a level of humanity. That feels good. That small act. Or giving money to the poor, you know what I mean? But what if you could do that but on a grand scale? You know what I mean? So, yeah. Again, I know this was all over the place, but just wanted to talk about it. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got. Peace. Take it easy.